Hey guys, Ginger here. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm bringing you guys my first quarter's worth of reading stats. I was on the fence if I was actually going to do this or not, but I was actually very intrigued to see what exactly my reading stats are for the first 3 months of the year, because it wasn't necessarily the best time for me reading wise, and so I went in, dived into what I read, and I got a few stats for you. So this is mostly going to be a chill stats video. If you don't like stats, that's fine. You don't have to watch this. But I'm mostly just going to be talking about some of the things that happened while I read in January, February, and March. So without further ado, I guess I'm just going to do it after I pull up my stats notes. I was kind of surprised by a few of these because I didn't really look at any of my stats up until last night when I was making these notes. In the past, I've done like monthly stats with my wrap-ups, but I have done away with that just because of time constraints and not wanting to film really. But I went back and got all of the stats for those past 3 months that I mentioned, and yeah, they're pretty interesting. So from January to March of 2020, I read 16 books, which could have been a lot better, but I was going through a reading slump. I was going through things changing in the world, and so considering all of that, I'm not disappointed too bad in myself and what I did accomplish to read. I read a total of 6,014 pages, so that ends up being about 370 page average for each book, which is about right. Most of them were at least 300 pages to 400 pages, so that's a pretty decent average. And I didn't do like a pages read per day because obviously that's hard to do over 3 months, and there was the fact that I barely read anything in February, and then I did decently well in March and January, so it didn't really make sense to do that. But I am pretty good with that page count and the amount of books read. My average rating for books ended up being a 3.53, so about 3.5. I really didn't read a lot of favorites, and I didn't really get a lot of really good books that I was blown away by. There were a couple, but mostly they were just 3s and 4s, and so nothing really to write home about. But it wasn't too awful. My rating breakdown, which I'll put a little pie chart here that I made, we had 2 5 stars, 1 4.5 star, 5 4 stars, 2 3.75 stars, which I could have just rounded down to a 3.5 probably, but it's fine. 1 3.5, 2 3 stars, 2 2 stars, and 1 1 star. So it's pretty mixed. The most common rating was a 4, it turns out. And I think that I had a pretty like rounded amount of bad and good books. I did end up doing a reading bad thrillers book, which is kind of why I had a lot of bad ratings, but overall the 4s and 5s were all ones that I chose to read, so that was good. Then my genre breakdown, we had 8 thrillers, so half of the books that I read in the first quarter of the year were thrillers, which is very surprising and probably why I've been more in a fantasy mood, because I am getting thrillered out apparently. Then we had 2 fantasies, 4 contemporary, 1 historical fiction, and 1 memoir. So again, it was pretty rounded reading wise. I tend to focus more on fantasy and thrillers, but apparently I'm okay with contemporary as well, and I got a few other mixes in there. And then the types of books, as in like where I acquired them, I had 4 that were ARCs that were sent to me that came out in those months. I had 3 that I borrowed from the library or Scribd, and then 9 were ones that I already owned, so it was good that I was getting a decent chunk from my TBR pile myself. The ones that I borrowed were, I think, because I wanted to listen to audiobooks, and then the other one was one that I borrowed from the library because I was really excited for it. So. And then I'm just going to tell you guys 3 of my favorites and 3 of my least favorites from the quarter, because this is a very short video and I just want to highlight some bad and good books that I ended up reading in those 3 months. So I'll start with the bad ones first. My 1 star was Not That I Could Tell by Jessica Strasser, and if you want to see more about that one, go ahead and watch my thriller reading vlog, which I will link in the corner. I'll talk a little bit more about it there. Similarly, Don't You Cry by Mary Kubica was in that video, and it was a 2-star for me. And they were just, both of them were really not great thrillers plot-wise. The Mary Kubica one was just very slow and dry in my opinion, and the other one was just very poorly written, very poorly demonstrated, and I could just definitely do without it. The other one that was probably my worst, one of the worst books I read last quarter was Saint X by Alexis Straitkin. I received this one as an ARC, and unfortunately I really didn't like it. I gave it a 2, and it mostly was because of the lack of mystery, lack of good cohesive structure. It really wasn't mysterious in my opinion. It didn't have any conclusions. I wouldn't even really necessarily consider it a thriller, but it kind of was. I don't know. I really didn't enjoy it. I would not recommend it. And I'm really sad that I've received it for review and had to give it a bad rating, but it is what it is. I just realized I forgot to give you guys another stat that I had on here. Whoops. It's my author ratio. If you were interested, we're gonna slip this in between the least favorite and favorites. So my author ratio was very surprising. I ended up reading 2 male authors, 1 mix that was an anthology, and 13 female authors. I really thought it would be more like half and half, but apparently I have a lot of female writers on my TBR, so that's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with that. Anyway, back to the favorites now. Like I said, I read 2 5-stars, and then the next one down was a 4.5 star. So the 4.5 star was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I was pleasantly and wonderfully surprised by how much I enjoyed that book. I listened to it on audio, and I think that that was a very good choice. I think that I would also have loved it reading it physically, but the audio just did something for me. It really made me, it was very atmospheric, and I really love the story that it told. And I'm really excited to get my hands on The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, because I've heard that one is also really good. And I wasn't necessarily expecting to love a historical fiction as much as I did, but I loved it. So the only reason I didn't give it a full 5 was because I thought that the ending was a little lackluster, but overall, like, I pretty much loved everything else about it. I just didn't see myself being able to give it a full 5 because it's not something that I can be like, it was completely flawless. So, and then my 2 5-stars, we had How to Walk Away by Catherine Senner, which I was not expecting to give a 5-star at all. It is a contemporary novel about a woman who is in a plane crash and is paralyzed, and she is recuperating from that. And it was just really well done. And there is a romance in there, but it's not the center of attention. It's not the center of the book, but it is in there. And it's mostly about healing and learning to love yourself again, and I just thought the message was so great. I loved it. I really do highly recommend it. And then the other favorite of the quarter was Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I had almost no doubts that this one was going to be a 5-star. It did not disappoint, and I cannot wait to continue on with the trilogy. I'm so glad I'm in the Brandon Sanderson club, and I can just say that I love his writing. I loved the plot of Mistborn. I thought it was such a good adult fantasy novel, and I really can't say much else besides go read it because it's really good. And if you haven't read Mistborn yet, well, just do it. So there we have it, guys. Those are some of my stats from January, February, and March of 2020. I hope you guys enjoyed it if you did end up watching it this far, and let me know in the comments below what some of your stats were, how many books you read, what some of your favorites or least favorites were, and yeah, let's just have a conversation in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you'll be able to see much more of my content in the future. I hopefully we'll have a lot going up in May as I'm getting back on a schedule and getting back into reading more. So thank you guys again for tuning in and watching my video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!